Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and we are going to be talking about Elder Scrolls Online, its most recent announcement, and how that will impact Bethesda's E3 2018 showcase. So a couple of videos ago, we talked about all these different announcements Bethesda was making. One of them pertained to Elder Scrolls Online. We knew it would be an expansion, and now it turns out we're going to the Summerset Isles for the first time since Elder Scrolls Arena, which is really exciting in its own right, and I'm actually curious to see how this DLC turns out, and I'm looking forward to playing it. But more importantly, this DLC was announced before E3, and it's even releasing before E3. So the gears started turning. I was like, oh my gosh, they're getting all these announcements out of the way. This is even dropping before E3. It's all said and done, man. I can't wait to see what's actually going to be at E3. And while I was quick to point that out on my Twitter, Pete Hines was even quicker to say the big one last year, Morrowind, came out before E3 as well, June 6th. And that's when I hit a screeching halt and thought to myself, oh boy, here is a scary, but honestly realistic possibility with their E3 conference. Are they setting up for what we'll call the short and sweet approach? Last year, Bethesda's conference didn't even scratch the 40-minute mark, and it felt very shallow, and it was just rolling clip after clip. There was no intimate discussion with the developers as they got on stage and debuted their game. And when he started mentioning last year how they did that with Morrowind, I thought, okay, let's see how ESO turned out for Bethesda's E3 conference last year, and it was a lot of people just reacting to going back to Morrowind, which I think in that specific scenario it makes sense because Morrowind is really what popularized Elder Scrolls. So I can see why putting a bunch of fan reactions and stuff in a video might make sense for that conference, and we're not going to really see that for the Summerset Isles. So then I looked at E3 2015 where Tamriel Unlimited had just dropped, and how they presented that. And once again, it was another video, but they also talked about what was coming up and announced a couple of other DLC. Considering this is an expansion of its own, I imagine it's going to be a trailer just reminding us that it's there. But point being, with all that aside, it did get me thinking, is Bethesda gearing up for another short and sweet conference? And quite honestly, when I started thinking about that, I definitely wanted to dial myself back a couple of notches because that possibility absolutely entered my mind. A lot of us are under the impression that Bethesda was so awful in last year's E3 conference that there's no chance they could do it again. But if the video game industry has taught us anything, it's that we should expect the unexpected. Now, I'm not saying enter this in a cynical fashion, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bethesda tried the short and sweet approach yet again. I think the biggest issue was that they didn't really have a home run during last year's E3. I am personally a big fan of how they approached E3 2015 and E3 2016. Obviously, a lot of us were not a fan of how 2017 turned out, and I hope they're not trying to take a second crack at it in 2018, but maybe if the content justifies it where we're getting a bunch of big announcements, will it even matter? Because at the end of the day, E3 is about the games. But anyway, the point of this video is about this announcement. How does it impact the E3 showcase? And for me personally, I think it can go either way, right? Based off how things are going, we can actually expect a shorter conference, but also how things are going, we can expect this announcement to clear some space for something else where we'll only see this expansion for, I'd say, about 2 to 3 minutes. Now, for clarity, I do want to mention that I still have the utmost confidence Bethesda Game Studios will be bringing something to this year's E3 showcase. In fact, I'd be more surprised if they didn't bring anything rather than if they did. With that said, though, I still think it's important to consider at least the possibility that this conference could be a bust like last year's. Bethesda is not immune to mistakes, and I think we'd regret it if we ignored that fact. So in a way, it has a minimal impact on the show, but it can help us gauge an idea of how long the conference will be. And these are the little things we're gonna wanna pay close attention to as we get closer to E3 if Bethesda has any more announcements up their sleeve. Anyway, that'll do it for me in this video, folks. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments down below, so fire away, ladies and gentlemen. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.